Hello, today's information video on how to use your manual for your Hyundai Kona is about coolant, your coolant reservoir, and what kind of coolant you use in your vehicle. Now, there are two kinds of reservoirs, at least in the US. I don't have any information on the 1.0 3-cylinder, and I don't know on the hybrid and the EV. So this just refers to the 1.6 turbo and a 2.0 non-turbo from 2017 and the end of 2017 to, I believe, 2021 before they changed over to the SmartStream engine. So engine coolant, which everybody tells me they can't find anything about, actually has a lot of pages. And some of these are diagrams. Some of these are specifications for when you actually need to change it, and under what conditions between both engines. Now, this is for the US. So refer to your manual in your country for your vehicle. That's important. And just about everybody has one. If you don't have one, you can go to a dealership and get them for free. Most places, at least in the US, you could usually get it for free. Or even Amazon sells them. They range between, I think, $15 to $45, depending on which model. And I think that's just because of how rare some of them are, like the 1.0s. There is one in there for the 1.0 for $55. I think it was the highest I've seen, but it's few and far between anywhere near that range. So today we are going to talk about coolant. So let's take a look. All right, step one is to open up the back of the book and look for the index. So index. So it starts on like I2. So we're going to look for coolant, which I have marked here. So I4 is the actual page I have to go to, which is this one. Engine coolant on page 723. Changing engine coolant on 726. And checking engine coolant level, 723. But that's only 3 pages, and I have, 8, 9 tabs? So there must be more involved. So let's take a look. I'll start in the front and work our way back. Let's see, what's the first one here? I think 7.3 is the first one. Yes. 7.3 is the diagram of the engine compartment. Sorry, I'm shaking. The reason I am not a surgeon. Engine compartment on the 1.6. Your coolant reservoir is right there. It says, number 1, engine coolant reservoir and engine coolant cap. But you notice strangely enough, on the 2.0, number 1 isn't there at all. Because number 9 is the engine coolant reservoir. So this is where it gets interesting. So number 1 is a reservoir, but it's got a line going in and a line coming out and a pressurized cap. Where the 2.0 has a radiator cap on the top radiator hose. And number 9, even though it says engine coolant reservoir, is actually an overflow jug or overflow tank. So this one's got some special requirements, and everybody that has the 2.0 struggles to figure this out. But I will explain. All right. So let's see. 719 looks like it's going to be the next page. What do we have here? Oop, 19. Where's 19? Oop, I got even more here. Sorry, apparently I was not prepared for this. They recommend for regular maintenance, at least monthly, check coolant level in the engine coolant reservoir. So you're supposed to check it every month. Do people do that? No. They also recommend in the owner's regular manual, when you stop for fuel, check the coolant level in the engine coolant reservoir. I know nobody does that. Not even me. And I check my vehicle every time I do an oil change. I go through and check every little item. So here's that. I really should put these in order, but I guess I didn't do that this time. All right, so we'll start off with the maintenance schedule. Normal maintenance schedule for the 2.0. Engine coolant. At first, replace at 120,000 miles or 10 years. Thereafter, replace every 30,000 miles or 24 months. That means whatever comes first. So 120,000 miles on your coolant. That's crazy. I check mine every year. Actually, I change mine every year. But again, I'm modified and I have the 1.6, so this doesn't apply to me. So yeah, that's interesting. So 120,000 miles or 10 years, whichever comes first. So if you're like me and did 120,000 miles in the first 8 months of ownership, then I'd have to change it. And that's what I do. But I would never go to 120,000 miles because by then it's probably pretty cruddy. All right, so that's on the 2.0. Now on the 1.6, see, normal maintenance schedule, gamma 1.6. Engine coolant's way down here now. At first, replace 120,000 miles or 10 years. Thereafter, replace every 30,000 miles or 24 months. Same thing as the 2.0. Do I recommend it? No, because you have a turbo, and the turbo is both oil-cooled and engine coolant cooled. Like radiator fluid cooled. So, because of the turbo, it's going to be going through a lot more cycles of hot and cold. I would recommend changing much sooner than that, but that's just me. All right, so let's see what's next. All right, 719, cooling system. Check coolant system components such as the radiator, coolant reservoir, hoses, and connections for leakage and damage. Replace any damaged parts. So this is in regards to explanation of scheduled maintenance items. And engine coolant. The coolant should be changed at the interval specified in the maintenance schedule. So 120,000 miles or 10 years. And then, how you go after that. Next page. Let's see here. Here we go, 724. Do I have a 720? Oh, here we go, 723. Engine coolant. Okay. The high pressure cooling system has a reservoir filled year-round antifreeze coolant. The reservoir is filled at the factory. Check the antifreeze protection and coolant level at least once a year at the beginning of the winter season and before traveling to a colder climate. Checking the engine coolant level. On the 1.6, there'll be a minimum and a maximum, or a low and a high kind of thing in it. Mine's not there because I have a different kind of tank. I use a swirl tank in my car. So I cannot show you a picture of it. My apologies. On the 2.0, there's this little cap here that kind of looks like a washer reservoir, but it's not. It's your coolant. So check the conditions and connections of all coolant system hoses and heater hoses. Replace any swollen or deteriorated hoses. The coolant level should be filled between the F and the L, full and low. Marks on the side of the coolant reservoir when the engine is cool. Not hot, but cool. Hot can possibly burn you, and you do not want to do that because it is pressurized. Oh, the 1.6 is at least in that container. The 2.0 is at the reservoir cap. The radiator cap, you'll notice the caps are quite a bit different because this on a 2.0 is not a pressurized cap. The radiator cap is on the 2.0 and it's separate. It's on the top hose, top radiator hose. If the coolant level is low, add enough distilled, deionized water to bring the level to the F mark, which means full. Do not overfill. If frequent additions are required, see your Honda dealership for a cooling system inspection. Distilled. Not regular water, but distilled. Deionized is the same thing. Distilled water is pre-boiled. So what does that mean? Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But water also contains minerals, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. There's actually a bunch of other stuff, and I can't remember what they all are off the top of my head. When you distill water, you're purifying it by boiling it. So when you boil it, it condenses, it turns into a vapor, it condenses into another container, leaving all the minerals behind. So you don't want the minerals in your cooling system because it wears things out, especially plastic parts. So distilled, that's those weird gallon bottles you find at a supermarket for like 99 cents on the bottom shelf that you're not supposed to drink. Well, this is what it's for. They use them in batteries and in cooling systems. There are other options to this, which are cost prohibitive for most people. and is more labor intensive, like Evans waterless coolant. That's what I use. That has no water in it. But if you do, you got to use distilled water. So recommended engine coolant. When adding coolant, use only distilled deionized water for your vehicle and never mix hard water, which is tap water or garden hose water, with your coolant that's filled in the factory. An improper coolant mixture can result in severe malfunction or engine damage. What does that mean? Wrong coolant will prevent you from getting heat in the car because it has to go through your heater core, and if you cannot get the temperature, the kind of water right, you're not going to get any heat inside the car. Also means you can adversely affect the engine coolant. Too little temperature change for the engine for cooling of the engine block can result in poor fuel economy, poor performance, and possible engine damage. Also, on the opposite side, too much water or the wrong coolant could make the engine overheat, seizing it. So you can do all sorts of damage if you use the wrong kind of coolant mixture. The engine in your vehicle has aluminum engine parts and must be protected by an ethylene glycol with phosphate-based cooling to prevent corrosion and freezing. Most engine coolants are ethylene-based. There'll be an ethylene glycol base with a phosphate base to prevent corrosion and freezing. So your Prestone yellow bottles, the Valvoline orange bottle, Valvoline yellow or green bottles. Sorry, not the orange. Orange is Dexcool, which is GM. Do not use Dexcool at all. You'll avoid any warranty that's in your cooling system. Dexcool was used for GM vehicles, and it was garbage. It would eat the seals in the intake manifolds, and it would shorten the life of the head gaskets, and it caused all sorts of damage. Plus, if you mix Dexcool with regular antifreeze, you create almost like a glue or molasses in your cooling system, and it would do all sorts of damage. Do not use Dexcool. Do not use alcohol or methanol coolant or mix them with a specified coolant. So don't use a Dexcool product or methanol, which is, you don't find that often unless it's like a diesel. We'll use an alcohol or methanol type. But on the 1.6 and 2 liters, you're not going to use it in this. All right. Do not use a solution that contains more than 60% antifreeze or less than 35% antifreeze, which would reduce the effectiveness of the solution, which is true. That's why 50-50 is recommended. If you're out in the desert, you could run like straight distilled water, but the antifreeze actually helps you have a higher boiling temperature as well. Also has a lot to do with the radiator cap. The higher the PSI rating on the radiator cap will allow a higher boiling point for the water in the radiator. However, if the system is not designed to handle a higher pressure radiator cap, something will explode. You'll spring a leak in one of the hoses or in a line or something. That was a common thing with the Nissans, where like the Sentras and the Ultimas would use the GTR radiator cap. The Sentra on the 2.5, the Spec V and SER could do it without a problem. But the Ultima with the same kind of engine had problems because the system was not designed for a 22-pound cap. And it would spring a leak and it would be a mess. For mixing percentages, refer to the following tables: ambient temperature, mixing percentage by volume. So 5 degrees or 15 degrees centigrade, minus 15 centigrade, 35% antifreeze, 65% water. If you go up to minus 49 Fahrenheit or minus 45 centigrade, 60% antifreeze, 40% water. Most people do this one for 50%. It's also the easiest to calculate. If in doubt about the mix ratio, a 50% water and 50% antifreeze mix is the easiest to mix together, as I just said, and it will have the same, which will be the same quantity of each. It is suitable for use in most temperature ranges of minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit and higher. Warning: for the 1.6 turbo GDI, make sure the coolant cap is properly closed after refilling coolant, otherwise the engine could overheat while driving. So they're telling you pretty much, make it straight. See where this is, make it straight. Check if the coolant label is straight in the front. It actually locks in that way. If you don't lock it in, you could blow the cap out of the top and get boiling hot coolant all over your engine compartment. Ask me how I know. Make sure that the tiny protrusions inside the coolant cap is securely interlocked. There's these tiny little knobs on the side, and they actually lock into place. You should feel and hear a visible click when you lock it in place. All right, so that's that one. On the 2.0, your coolant goes in at the top radiator hose, because that uses an actual radiator cap, while the 1.6 does not, but there's both pressure caps. They're just different designs. Warning, never remove engine coolant reservoir tank, radiator cap, or the drain plug while the engine and radiator are hot. Hot coolant and steam may blow out under pressure, causing serious injury. Most notably, burns. Really bad second and third degree burns. So highly recommend you do not open the caps when it's hot. What do I consider hot? If there's anything on your temperature gauge inside your dashboard, do not open that cap. So turn the engine off and wait until the engine cools down. Use extreme care when removing the engine coolant reservoir, tank or radiator cap. Wrap a thick towel around it and turn counterclockwise slowly to the first stop. Step back while the pressure is released from the cooling system. When you're sure all the pressure has been released, press down on the cap using the thick towel and continue turning counterclockwise to remove it. Warning, the electric fan for the cooling fan may continue to operate or start up when the engine is not running. A lot of people don't understand this. So, especially on the turbo, because it has a turbo timer set into it, that fan can turn on and off anytime it wants. Keep hands and clothing and tools away from the rotating fan blades of the cooling fan. In order to turn it off, you either have to disconnect the battery or pull the fuse. Just remember to replace it before you decide to start the car again. The electric motor for the cooling fan is controlled by engine coolant temperature, refrigerator pressure, and vehicle speed. As the engine coolant temperature decreases, the electric motor will automatically shut off. This is a normal condition. If your vehicle is equipped with a GDI, gas direct injection, the electric motor for the cooling fan may begin to operate at any time and continue to operate until you disconnect the negative battery terminal. So, it's important to understand. Now that's on the 1.6. The 2.0 is going to be a little bit different. Okay. For changing the engine coolant, have a authorized Honda dealership, blah, blah, blah. I don't recommend that. For any reason you can't go to the dealership, I applaud you. I'm not a fan of the dealership. They have screwed my car up so many times in such bad ways that, a lawsuit was involved. So we're not going to go through that at all. Again, warning, do not use engine coolant or antifreeze in the washer fluid reservoir. You would be surprised how many people with a 2.0 do that, where they cannot tell the difference between a blue cap and a black cap. Blue is washer fluid, black is coolant. Engine coolant can severely obscure visibility when sprayed on a windshield and may cause loss of vehicle control, resulting in an accident. Yes, coolant on a windshield will smear like dead bugs across the windshield, and you're not going to be able to get it off that easily. Plus, it's going to smell not particularly great, and it can kill you that way as well. Engine coolant may also cause damage to paint and body trim. It'll peel paint. To prevent damage to engine parts, put a thick towel around the radiator cap before refilling coolant to prevent coolant from overflowing into the engine parts such as the alternator. So, yeah, just basic precautions. All right. Let's see, what do I have left here? Okay, so I'm going to the specifications page. I thought I had another page left to explain the difference between the 1.6 and 2.0 reservoir, but I cannot find it at the moment. So, looked up the specifications on page 8.8, which wasn't even listed in the back, but it's in here. Lubricant, coolant. The 1.6 gamma, 7.5 US quarts or 7.1 liters. On the new, that's the 2.0 non-turbo, it's 6.8 US quarts, 6.5 liter. Now, do you realize that, right? 1.6 is a smaller engine, but uses more coolant because we're turbocharged. So the turbo requires more coolant. We also have a larger radiator. So classification, mixture of antifreeze and water, phosphate-based ethanol glycol coolant, aluminum radiator. Yes, your radiator in your vehicle is aluminum, not copper, not brass, not plastic. It's got plastic tanks, but it is an aluminum radiator. So don't try hitting it with anything because you could possibly break it. So I'm going to go back to the front page and try to explain to you what the difference between the 1.6 and the 2.0 coolant reservoir is. So on the 1.6, the coolant reservoir is up here on the passenger side. Got two hoses going to it. Actually, might actually have three in this case. Let me see. Nope, two, because the other's a connector on the back. All right, so you have line coming off the intake manifold. It actually comes right in the middle of the intake manifold to the bottom of the coolant jug. And then there's one on top that goes back to the radiator. This is effectively known as a swirl tank or burp tank, sometimes a puke tank. All different names for this. So it's got an air release at the top. It actually, on the other side of the cap, there's a tiny little question mark shaped thing. So air can get burped out of the system. So as coolant runs through it, it actually spins on the inside, almost like a toilet, like as if a toilet's trying to drain. But that's what it does. So you get coolant, spins, and releasing the air out of the system. It automatically burps the system. It's not perfect because there are coolant lines that are higher up. They're actually down here, but there's some in the back that are higher up that go into the turbo. On the 2.0, this one here is a coolant tank. Now, what do I mean by tank? Well, it's an empty container. It's got a high and a low on it, but all it is an overflow from the radiator. So here's the line that comes off and goes into that bottle. That's all it is an overflow. So during the operation of a car, it heats up, temperature heats up, the coolant expands, because water expands when it gets hot. It has to go somewhere. So this cap will actually open up. It'll literally pop up because it's pressurized. It's got a little copper valve on the inside and a spring. It opens up almost like a thermostat. It opens up and releases the pressure into the tank. Why is it going into the tank? Well, because it's against the law to drop it on the ground. Back in the 70s and 80s you could do that, but it turned out to be an environmental hazard because it pollutes the ground. It pollutes the water, pollutes everything. Dogs and cats, small animals are attracted to the smell of the antifreeze and it will kill them. So if that's on low or if it's on high, as long as it's not overflowing, then it's fine. If this is literally overflowing out of the top, there's a problem. If the container is empty, it's fine because it's still an overflow tank. It means the pressure in the cap hasn't gotten high enough in order to need to open up. So some vehicles, there's a little bit at the bottom. Some vehicles it's high. We see people all the time with the 2.0 top it off to the full mark, and then when they drive, it overflows and makes a mess. Again, because it's an overflow tank. So if you have a 2.0, it's an overflow tank. Do not fill it to the full line. If you have the 1.6, you have a swirl tank. It's got the two hoses instead of one. One goes to the radiator, one goes to the intake manifold. When the cap opens up, it'll purge it out the side, but it's usually just air. It's kind of like a little one-way valve kind of thing. Because the 1.6 does not have a radiator cap, where you have a radiator cap here at the top of the hose, the 1.6 does not have that. You can see it here, there's the hose, but there's no cap there. There's no pressurized cap. 1.6 is on the tank. So that's how you know pretty much what the difference is between the two. Now you know what kind of fluid goes in it, when you're supposed to change it, and all that good stuff, and how to locate it in your vehicle. All right? So that is it. Thank you. Have a wonderful freaking day.